Imagine a nation surrounded by challenges, faced with an adversary that outspends it on weapons and technology, yet still manages to command respect in the skies. Imagine an air force that doesn't just fly jets, but turns every aircraft into part of a larger, smarter, and deadlier system. This is not a story of the strongest wallet. It is a story of strategy, ingenuity, and resilience that has made Pakistan's jet fleet the subject of global case studies. Pakistan's approach to modernizing and expanding its jet fleet has become one of the most closely studied aspects of its military evolution in the eyes of Western think tanks, largely because it illustrates how a mid-sized power can creatively balance cost, necessity, and strategic requirements in the face of complex threats. Over the last 2 decades, the Pakistan Air Force has deliberately transitioned away from an over-reliance on aging American F-16s and older Mirage variants to a broader, more diversified fleet that not only enhances operational effectiveness but also reduces vulnerability to supply chain disruptions and political restrictions. The induction of Chinese J-10C multi-role fighters, which come equipped with advanced active electronically scanned array (AESA) radars, beyond visual range missiles, and improved avionics, represents a leap in capability that is particularly notable for Western analysts who tend to measure air power in terms of network-centric warfare. In parallel, the continued expansion of the JF-17 Thunder program, which is jointly developed with China but heavily assembled and supported within Pakistan, highlights a strategy of not just buying jets, but building them in a way that supports long-term autonomy. These newer blocks of JF-17, such as the Block 3 variant, carry modern avionics and weaponry that put them closer to the performance of higher-end fourth-generation fighters, yet at a fraction of the cost. Western think tanks note that this approach effectively multiplies combat potential because it allows Pakistan to field larger numbers of capable jets without exhausting its defense budget, a dynamic they often contrast with India's reliance on expensive imports, such as the Rafale. Moreover, modernization has not simply been about adding new aircraft, but about upgrading older fleets to integrate modern weapons and sensors, meaning that even legacy aircraft are not obsolete, but are reshaped into relevant assets within a larger operational doctrine. This balance between procurement of new high-tech platforms, indigenous production, and smart upgrading creates a layered force structure that Western observers see as a model for other states facing similar budgetary and geopolitical constraints. It shows how modernization, when pursued strategically, can extend far beyond raw acquisition and create an integrated system that pushes limited resources to deliver maximum capability in contested airspace. When Western think tanks describe Pakistan's jet fleet as a force multiplier case study, they rarely limit their analysis to the fighters themselves, because the real strength lies in the supporting ecosystem that allows those aircraft to perform well beyond their baseline capabilities. A fleet of combat jets on its own has limitations in terms of range, endurance, detection, and coordination. But when paired with specialized force-multiplying assets, those limitations can be offset and even turned into strengths. Pakistan has invested heavily in acquiring and integrating airborne early warning and control systems such as the Swedish Saab 2000 Erie and Chinese ZDK-03 platforms, which extend the reach of radar surveillance far beyond what individual fighters could achieve. These assets enable commanders to maintain situational awareness over large swaths of airspace, track multiple targets simultaneously, and coordinate intercepts with precision, which analysts argue is essential for modern air warfare, where information dominance is as important as firepower. Aerial refueling capability, provided by aircraft like the IL-78 tanker, adds another critical layer to this multiplier effect by extending the endurance of Pakistan's fighters, allowing them to operate at greater distances and sustain sorties during prolonged operations. Electronic warfare, often overlooked in casual discussions but closely studied by defense analysts, is another element Pakistan has steadily improved, with reports suggesting investment in jamming systems, electronic countermeasures, and integration of electronic support pods on fighters like the JF-17. This dimension complicates an adversary's ability to lock on, target, or communicate effectively, giving Pakistani pilots greater freedom to maneuver and strike. In addition to these high-tech systems, logistical enablers such as strategic airlift aircraft and advanced ground-based radar networks contribute to the overall force multiplication by ensuring that assets can be deployed quickly, supported adequately, and coordinated across diverse terrain and weather conditions. For Western observers, the lesson drawn from this approach is that Pakistan's air power does not merely hinge on the raw number or quality of its jets, but on the synergy created when those jets operate in an environment enriched by sensors, refueling, electronic warfare, and command and control nodes that turn a medium-sized fleet into a networked, resilient, and disproportionately effective fighting force. Western think tanks often stress that Pakistan's air power cannot be understood by looking only at the technology or the size of its jet fleet, because what truly amplifies its impact is the way these assets are employed under an operational doctrine shaped by real-world conflict experience. Unlike many nations that build air power primarily on theoretical models or simulated exercises, Pakistan has repeatedly been forced into actual combat scenarios that test its readiness and refine its doctrine. The most cited case is Operation Swift Retort in 2019, when Pakistan retaliated after Indian airstrikes and successfully carried out precision strikes across the line of control while simultaneously defending its airspace. Analysts point out that this event demonstrated not just technical proficiency, but also the integration of planning, timing, and tactical discipline, where Pakistani jets operated under cover of surveillance assets and electronic support to ensure both offensive and defensive objectives were met. The ability to manage escalation while proving credibility in air operations gave think tanks valuable data about how a mid-sized air force could achieve disproportionate results against a numerically superior adversary. This operational doctrine emphasizes flexibility, rapid mobilization, and the use of force multipliers such as airborne early warning systems to orchestrate responses in layered defense. Pakistan has also built doctrine around leveraging geography to its advantage, using terrain and radar coverage intelligently, which analysts argue makes its air force more agile than larger but less flexible adversaries. Exercises like Highmark and Shaheen, conducted with international partners such as China, further reinforce this doctrine by combining domestic experience with exposure to foreign tactics, creating a hybrid learning environment that strengthens adaptability. Western experts note that this continuous cycle of training, testing in conflict and updating doctrine ensures that the Pakistan Air Force does not treat its jets as static platforms, but as evolving tools integrated into a living operational philosophy. This real-world reinforcement makes its strategies more credible than paper doctrines, which often look good in theory but remain untested in practice, and it is this dynamic between capability and experience that convinces analysts to classify Pakistan's fleet as a compelling case study in force multiplication. One of the most compelling reasons Western think tanks highlight Pakistan's jet fleet as a force multiplier case study is the country's pursuit of indigenous production and the strategic autonomy that flows from it. In contrast to nations that rely almost entirely on foreign suppliers for aircraft, maintenance, and upgrades, Pakistan has invested decades of effort into developing a domestic aerospace industry anchored around the JF-17 Thunder program, which it co-developed with China but now produces extensively at the Pakistan Aeronautical Complex in Camera. This initiative allows Pakistan to not only meet its immediate operational requirements, but also sustain a long-term pipeline for upgrading avionics, integrating new weapons, and customizing platforms according to evolving threats. Western analysts find this remarkable because many countries of similar economic size remain trapped in cycles of dependency, where political shifts, sanctions, or supply chain disruptions can cripple their ability to maintain fleets. Pakistan's approach reduces this vulnerability by ensuring that key parts of its fleet can be produced, maintained, and modernized domestically, and this autonomy translates directly into operational resilience. For instance, the Block 3 variant of the JF-17 has been upgraded with active electronically scanned array radars, helmet-mounted displays, and integration for long-range missiles, all of which give the aircraft capabilities closer to higher-end fighters, but at a fraction of the cost. Beyond the JF-17, indigenous capacity building also extends to refurbishing older Mirage aircraft, fitting them with modern avionics and standoff weapons like the Rarad air-launched cruise missile, which dramatically expands their deterrence value despite the age of the platform. By building expertise in both new production and the modernization of legacy systems, Pakistan demonstrates to Western observers how strategic autonomy can stretch resources and maintain combat readiness, even when financial and political constraints exist. This ability to self-sustain and adapt is seen as a model for other nations facing similar challenges, showing that indigenous production is not merely about pride or symbolism, but about creating a foundation for long-term independence in military capability, reducing vulnerability to external pressure, and allowing the Air Force to operate with confidence that its most critical assets will remain available and effective when needed. Western think tanks often describe Pakistan's air power strategy as a lesson in cost efficiency because it demonstrates how a country with limited resources can still build a credible and formidable force without chasing the prestige of extremely expensive fifth-generation aircraft that only a few global powers can afford in significant numbers. Instead of pouring billions into a small fleet of high-end jets, Pakistan has balanced its investments by acquiring cost-effective platforms like the JF-17 Thunder, which offers modern avionics, beyond visual range capabilities, and adaptability at a fraction of the cost of aircraft such as the American F-35 or French Rafale. This allows Pakistan to field larger numbers of capable aircraft, which means more sorties can be flown, more airspace can be covered, and operational flexibility is preserved in ways that even expensive aircraft cannot always guarantee when purchased in small numbers. Analysts point out that this strategy makes particular sense for Pakistan's defense environment, where the need is not to project power globally, but to maintain a robust deterrent and flexible strike capability against a regional rival with a larger economy and military budget. The emphasis on affordability also extends to how Pakistan integrates standoff weapons, cruise missiles, and electronic warfare systems onto its older platforms, giving them relevance long after their production lines have closed. This upgrading practice multiplies combat power at minimal additional cost, effectively ensuring that even a small investment can deliver an outsized strategic return. The comparison with India is often made in Western reports, where India's expensive acquisitions, like the Rafale jets, come in limited numbers and place heavy strains on its defense budget, while Pakistan's doctrine allows for more evenly spread capability that prioritizes numbers, readiness, and sustainment. Think tanks see this as a demonstration of smart power projection, where every dollar spent yields measurable operational output, and the country avoids the trap of overcommitting to high-end platforms that may be technologically advanced, but logistically and financially difficult to maintain over long periods. By pursuing this balance between cost efficiency and fleet size, Pakistan's Air Force embodies the principle that strategic effectiveness is not always about the most advanced technology, but about how intelligently resources are allocated to achieve consistent operational superiority. Western think tanks consistently emphasize that Pakistan's geography and threat environment play a decisive role in shaping the way its jet fleet functions as a force multiplier, because the country is situated at a crossroads of South Asia, Central Asia, and the Middle East, with terrain that includes deserts, plains, and towering mountains. This complex geography demands an air force that can respond quickly to diverse operational challenges, from defending high-altitude regions like the Karakoram and Himalayas to patrolling long stretches of flat plains bordering India. The constant presence of a regional adversary with a larger and more resource-rich air force means Pakistan cannot afford complacency and must build its air strategy on agility, resilience, and deterrence. Analysts note that this environment magnifies the importance of having a well-rounded fleet equipped with long-range strike options, standoff munitions, and force multipliers such as early warning aircraft and aerial refueling, because the ability to detect threats early and respond with precision is crucial when reaction times can be measured in minutes. Geography also influences how Pakistan integrates its air bases into its defense doctrine, with dispersal strategies that make it harder for an adversary to neutralize assets in a single strike, while also ensuring that jets can be launched rapidly from locations spread across the country. Furthermore, the mountainous terrain provides opportunities for radar coverage challenges and surprise tactics, which the Pakistan Air Force has learned to exploit through training and operational planning, adding another layer of complexity to its deterrence posture. Western think tanks often compare this to other mid-sized powers that do not face such immediate existential threats, highlighting how Pakistan's constant exposure to high-stakes scenarios forces it to refine doctrine and capability in ways that would not occur in a more stable environment. This geographical and strategic reality means that every improvement in air power, whether through new jets, electronic warfare systems, or aerial refueling, carries more weight than it would in a less demanding setting, turning Pakistan's fleet into a disproportionately significant element of national defense and giving analysts reason to label it a model case of how environment shapes force multiplication. The reason Western think tanks call Pakistan's jet fleet a force multiplier is not simply because of the machines it flies, but because of the philosophy behind them. It is the ability to combine modernization with affordability, indigenous production with strategic autonomy, and doctrine with real-world experience. It is the skill of turning geography into an advantage, of using support systems to make every jet count, and of proving in the face of larger powers that smart power can rival sheer power. In the end, Pakistan's air strategy is more than a collection of aircraft. It is a blueprint for how nations with limited resources can still build a decisive edge, reminding the world that true strength lies not only in what you have, but in how you use it.